Hello everyone and welcome to Session Heroes episode 4. Today we're picking up where we left off with Michael Landau and bringing ourselves up to the present day. This may even be our final episode on Mike, we'll have to wait and see. I hope you enjoy it. Having played on some of the biggest records of the 80s and 90s, Mike continued his work as a prolific studio musician, recording for artists such as Miles Davis, Celine Dion, Mariah Carey, Michael Jackson, Cher and James Taylor, who Mike first worked with 10 years earlier when he joined his band in 1991. Over the next few years, Mike would release 2 live albums with the Michael Landau Group and a new full-length studio album, The Star-Spangled Banner. In 2010, Mike joined forces with fellow musical giants Robin Ford, Jimmy Haslett and Gary Novak to form Renegade Creation, a guitar-driven and vocal-centric rock band heavily rooted in blues. As anyone who follows Mike will know, his gear is constantly evolving in small ways. For a few years now, we've seen him using a setup that centres around 2 pedal boards, a wet and a dry board. To list every past iteration of these pedal boards would take some time, but regular favourites include, on the dry board, the Maxon ST9, the Way Huge Green Rhino, the Roger Mayer Voodoo 1, the Dover Drive from Love Pedal and Hamida Audio, the Vemiram Janray, the Vibe Machine by Dry Bell, the Blue Hippo chorus pedal from Way Huge, which has more recently replaced Mike's famous Arion chorus, and the Suhr Jackrabbit Tremolo. On the wet pedal board, we often see a Strymon Timeline and or the Electro Harmonics Deluxe Memory Man, and either a Strymon Flint, Hardwire RV7, TC Electronic Hall of Fame or a Super Spring Theory by Sub-Decay reverb unit. The output from the dry pedal board is split, so the direct goes straight into his main amp and the ISO out feeds the wet pedal board, which then sends Mike's reverbs and delays out in parallel to the second amp. So a reverb will go into one channel of his super reverb amp, for example, and the delay will go into the other, allowing him to use the amp a bit like an effects mixer. Amps we've seen Mike use over the last few years include his signature Fender ML DeVille's, a Dumble slide winder head, a Fender Blackface Super Reverb, a Suhr Badger 18. Then from Morgan Amplification we've seen the ML12, which is a modified version of their PR12 with no reverb, and also possibly a Morgan SW50, which has a special mod just for Mike. We've seen Mike use a bunch of different guitars over the years, but recently we've seen a lot of his 63 Fiesta Red Stratocaster and the reproduction model that Fender made for him, a 52 Telecaster, a 65 Jaguar, a 68 Gibson 335, a 63 Gibson SG, and most recently Mike's master-built Fender Stratocaster in vintage blonde, which features an ash body, maple neck, tortoiseshell scratch plate, and Lola Imperial humbuckers. In 2012, Mike released a new fully instrumental studio album, Organic Instruments. Aside from touring regularly with James Taylor in recent years, Mike is also a member of the Steve Gadd Band, along with regular collaborator Jimmy Johnson. Okay, so I'm going to do this section a little bit differently to how I normally would. I'm just going to look at one sound, and then I'm going to talk about a couple of Landau-isms. Not licks, just kind of little devices that you can use to get a little bit of that into your playing, I guess. So I'm going for a fairly generic kind of relatively modern day Landau lead sound. So it's kind of similar to what I used on the Bullet track. There's three components here. I have an overdrive, So in this case it's a TS style overdrive, which is set with everything straight up, everything is at 12 o'clock. In this case it's a monotone blue collar, so the amp is completely clean. So this is the OD. Okay, fairly generic. You just need to kind of make sure that you have enough gain and enough sustain on it to work with your particular pickups. You know, to get the sustain out of it that you need. Next thing I'm going to add in is a delay. So, okay, it's not quite a slapback. There's about 3 repeats, and it's probably a little bit slower than a slapback delay, but a little bit quicker than what I'd normally use. So, in my opinion, Mike's sound has got a lot more roomy recently, so a more prominent use of reverbs, and whereas previously delays and stuff might have sat behind the sound, it's almost like he will deliberately use them to sort of interfere with it to create this kind of slightly more chaotic vibe sometimes. So that's what I'm kind of going for. Okay, last thing I'm adding in is a 60s style spring reverb. It's pretty wet, really, more so than what I would usually sort of favour. So if we combine the 3 elements, then we get this sort of thing. Now, in terms of a couple of simple Landau-isms you can sort of play with, one is the tension he creates with bends. So, for example, if we're in D, as in sort of D7, one thing you'll hear him do a lot is if he's bending up to the root, so for example bending from the 13th fret up to the note of the 15th, he will relax it by a semitone and then bring it back up. So technically he's bringing in a note that shouldn't fit, which is the major 7th, like that, but the way he does it is really cool. So. Okay, that. Sounds weird doing it slow, but in context it sounds cool, and you can do it in other places. Obviously if you're bending up to the 5th, then you're going to pick up on the flat 5 anyway. So. One thing that you'll hear him do sometimes with his clean playing are these sort of bends. Those sort of micro bends almost sound a little bit, you know, kind of like Indian music. So. And the way you do that is just, again, if we're thinking D at the moment, we bend the note at the 12th fret of the B, up a half step. If I do slowly what I'm doing, but it happens really quick, so it's like, has a cool effect to it. He also will do, you can hear it on stuff like the Big Black Bear, these sort of kind of wide slides essentially. So another thing you can play with a little bit are double stops. So for example, Mike will often be seen tremolo picking a double stop line moving up the neck. So if we're in sort of D again, you might take something like this. Okay, which again, it's all just kind of like derived from pentatonic scale positions. In that case, we join it chromatically, and then just but essentially tremolo picking them, so keeping a really loose right hand. and he'll also just kind of rev up to them, so we might have something like this. Although Mike still maintains a steady output of session credits, it seems that these days he dedicates more time to developing his own music or working with long-time friends and collaborators. His work with James Taylor and Steve Gadd allows him to shine as the master that he is within an ensemble of incredible and experienced musicians. So, as always, I'd like to close this episode with some recommended listening. In my opinion, anything Mike's done in the last 10 years, or even before that, with James Taylor has always been really, really good, both in the studio and live. Likewise, the album that he did with Steve Gadd sort of semi-recently, there's some really, really great playing on that as well. And again, he's sort of touring with Steve semi-regularly. But ultimately, I think that at this point, you know, Mike's own records are what we should all be checking out. He's become he's always been, but he's now such an expressive and such a unique player. His approach has just evolved to this whole new level, that I think checking out his own records is the best place to sort of hear what he does, you know, in his element, I guess. My personal favourite of sort of more recent years, I suppose, is Organic Instruments. I think that's a great record, and there's some lovely, lovely sounds on there as well. He has just dropped a new record, of course, Rock Bottom, which is a bit more vocal centric, but there's some really, really cool stuff on there as well. But I was actually really dreading doing this episode because Mike's got to this point now in his musical development where he's completely impossible to mimic. It's really, really hard. He's got such interesting phrasing, especially on stuff like the Big Black Bear. There's some lovely, lovely playing on that record. So definitely go and check out Organic Instruments and Mike's new record. And if you want an extra treat, check out the records that he did with Robin Ford, the Renegade Creation ones, the self-titled one, and then the follow-up, which is called Bullet. Both really good as well. Hope you've enjoyed this episode on Mike. For now, this will probably be it. It may be that, you know, Michael brings something else out, or I'll go back and revisit a certain period or something like that. But for now, I'm going to move on to other guys. I have plans for many, many more session breaks coming up. So if you're enjoying these, please subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys soon. Bye bye.